Hello and welcome to the video series dedicated to the overview of the Project Resource Manual published by the Construction Specifications Institute, or CSI. In this video, we're gonna have a brief overview of Module 2, and that is the project conception. So in Module 2, we're going to go through chapter by chapter, just provide like a 30,000 foot view on what is actually described there in the book. So the major four components that need to be determined during project conception are function, form, economy, and time. So as far as defining the project, first of all, we need to identify the goals, and the owner needs to identify what functional considerations they would like to see. Then existing conditions need to be revised, aesthetics need to be discussed with the architect, economics, what actually is important and what is expected from the project. Then the local regulations such as codes, laws, and other building department requirements need to be considered as well. Then social considerations such as public agencies that may be involved, such as utilities, streets and highways, bridges, dams, and other infrastructure facilities. Then environmental concern, the awareness of all living creatures and components of the natural and human-made environment need to be considered as well. And of course, time, the owner's time requirements are a very important factor. So before beginning the project, the architect needs to collect and analyze the facts, what actually is there, and first of all, the architect needs to prioritize and see what is actually important and what defines the project goals. And the owner plays a crucial role here. And actually, the owner sometimes is not the best person to work with, and that needs to be evaluated. For example, like if that's an experienced owner who has previously worked on other construction projects and has a really good history of communication relationship with the contractor, with the architect, and other parties, that's the preferred owner. But if there is a person with a history of litigations or bankruptcy or something like that, that's the project that the architect and the construction management company should walk away from. So then the feasibility study happens at this stage. We need to determine the initial economic feasibility and just analyze the site and just make sure that this project makes sense before we start spending money on that. As far as the program statements, the owner needs to provide the program, what initially they would like to see there, and then it can be corrected in the conversations with the architect. So the owner needs to provide the geotechnical and survey information, and then the architect will come back with the studies and relevant information and some statistics and some preliminary code due diligence. So as far as the goals for this stage, what actually needs to be achieved is we need to, in general, determine the function, the form, the economy, and the time of the project. And that will dictate and inform the rest of the project. So the life cycle cost is something that we cannot neglect, and this is important not just to see the initial cost of the project, but analyze the cost of the project during the life of the facility. So just try to understand how many years this is going to be used for and what impact it's going to have. Then the owner needs to provide the proof of financing, that the owner has the capacity to pursue this project, to pay, and to provide the budget. If that is the existing facility that needs to be renovated or rehabilitated, then the existing facility evaluation needs to happen, such as structural evaluation. That's the integral part, and the structural engineer needs to assess the structure, whether all the components are safe, such as foundation, floors, and the superstructure. Then environmental evaluation. If there is the brownfield, for example, and it requires remediation, then the environmental agencies shall be approached, and the plan needs to be determined how to approach that and what tax credits are available, how long it's going to take, and other things. So if there is an archaeological or architectural site that is going to be built on, then that needs to be assessed as well, like historic preservation, and if there are any restoration or rehabilitation aspects are going to happen, then that will require additional types of investigative studies. Then we need to study the site, actually evaluate and analyze the site, the topography, the orientation, if there are any existing buildings, easements, or site utilities, or if it's in the floodplain, or if there are any difficulties with the property lines. So that needs to be, of course, evaluated before the project begins. Then also, the environmental study can include the preliminary energy modeling or daylighting studies. So that can be just very simple diagrammatic form, and that can be uploaded to some software like Sapphire or others. And that can be just, we can really determine like what is the best location and or building orientation on this particular site. So as far as the facility assessment, there are a few things that need to be considered. So if that is the existing building, and if it's like minor reengineering or rehabilitation, that's the lowest expense, and that's the most constraining actually project, because there is a facility in place and we need to accommodate, and we need to make sure that if the project is going to be in phases, so we don't disturb the occupants or tenants, and that can be of a concern. Then if it's modification or expansion of the building, then it's the expense is still low, and the moderate constraining, and then the need for future changes are actually is very likely. If it's a relocation or adaptive reuse, then it involves moderate expense, and then the moderate constraint as well. If it's a new construction, then it can go to the high expense and very few constraints, since there is no other building in place, but that is going to cost more. If it's like a multiple project, multiple building project, or if it's like a master plan development or it's development phases, then that's the highest expense, and then that's the longest schedule duration, but that's the fewest constraints at the same time. So in order to evaluate the site, we also need to look at the surrounding conditions, and we need to take a look at the local economic and social conditions and the infrastructure. And while selecting potential site, that is critical, depends on the program. Then also when the site is selected, then the things like that need to happen. you need to reach out to the zoning and building department and make sure that everything is in compliance, that the lot is buildable, then the setbacks are the ones that we're planning for, and if there are any other limitations or other restrictions that we need to consider, then we need to make sure that they are properly addressed. Then if the owner decides to go ahead with the acquisition of the land, the architect can actually advise on that, like what they think will be better. Like if there is a better location, they can advise on that. Of course, that's the cost is something that owner needs to determine whether it is good for their budget or not. So, and if we talk about the budget, the project budget should not be confused with the construction budget. So there are hard costs and soft costs. And hard costs include tangible components of the complete projects, such as construction budget, the purchase of the site, demolition of an existing facility on the site, built-in systems, equipment, and so on. Soft costs are all other items, such as expenses on the architect and engineering services, then bonding, insurance, and financing costs. So as far as the influence on the cost, the influence is the ability to influence the cost is highest at the conception of the project. And as the project develops, goes through schematic design, design development, construction documents, and then bidding, negotiating, and then construction and facility management, then the influence is getting lower and lower. So it's easy to take care of the changes in the very beginning. And engineers and other specialists need to be involved as early as possible in the project. So the construction budget can be actually accomplished by several methods. The first one is cost per measure, and that can be like, for example, like $100 per square foot, and that's just the example. Then the component cost. So that is, for example, cost per room, like at the hotel, or cost per bed at the hospital. So that is the component cost, or the systems. And CSI actually use this as a cost guide format. So it breaks down a facility into systems like substructure, shell, interiors, services, equipment and furnishings, and then special construction and demolition, site work, and general. So that is a different way to calculate. Then when we talk about the budget, we cannot forget about the contingencies. And in general, contingency factor can be as high as 20% during project conception. Then it goes down to 15% during programming and 3 to 10% during construction. So there should always be some budget allocated for the unknown. So that needs to be accounted as well. As far as the project scheduling, we need to have a clear schedule. And there are a few software programs that allow us to put milestones and then determine determine those during the project conception. And of course, the final occupancy date needs to be determined as well. So substantial completion, that needs to be something that everybody should keep in mind. And then also other project milestones, something that owner will be very particular about. The facility performance criteria. So that is something that we need to understand, and that can be expressed in unit measure, quantities, and as performance criteria. And that can be developed using various methods or software. Information integration. The project needs to be built in the software, and for the most part now Revit is used, but some firms still use AutoCAD, and it depends on the level of the detail that the owner would like to see. So also what else needs to be considered during this stage is actually the communication, like how the team is going to be communicating throughout the project, like what methods and what software they're going to use, whether it's going to be meetings through Teams or Zoom or online, at some other platform, or it's going to be in person. So that needs to be determined at this stage. And that's basically it for module 2. Thank you for watching.